Thanks again to the Longorias for lighting our candles today. Would you pray with me? Loving God, may the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts and minds be pleasing to you, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. My friend Fran cares for her disabled mom. She has muscular dystrophy and she's getting very, very weak. And this past week, Fran's mom had to go to the hospital, which is scary in and of itself, just transporting her because she's so fragile. And this was awful for Fran, the whole thing, being in the hospital, not knowing what's going to happen. Her mom wasn't herself. And in the midst of it, she and some of us girlfriends were using instant messenger and trying to keep up. And she said that a chaplain had come in and had given her the opportunity to draw a card out of a little deck. And this is the card that Fran drew. You can put that up on screen. What that says, her little card, is the surest mark of a Christian is not faith or even love, but joy. Okay, so I saw that. This came up on my instant messenger, and I thought, what baloney is that? Right. I thought, this is the kind of happy, clappy Christian stuff that gives us a bad name. This is, and I'm thinking all of this, I'm thinking this is like that stuff we say when we want people to feel better, like, God doesn't give you more than you can handle, and that stuff that we all know is complete baloney and worthy of violence sometimes. But no, not really, not really. I've had a hard week, so I'm looking at this thinking, no. But then Fran, I didn't say anything. Luckily, I didn't. I just talk and don't think, and y'all all know that all too well. But she messaged back that this was so comforting. So I thought, okay, then I'm not going to rail against greeting card platitudes. But what if it's true? What if, because I'm in a snarky bad mood and I'm feeling the weight of the world, I don't buy it, but what if I'm missing the actual mark of the Christian life? What if this is true? And we're told in the Advent season, it's hope, peace, joy, and love. Joy is something we're supposed to be feeling, but man, in my experience, following Jesus Christ leaves you flayed open. And again, this may just be a couple of bad weeks here for me, but I'm thinking back to the Nigerian schoolgirls who were kidnapped. Just recently, they got a few of them back, but they're still just gone from their parents. We think about Zika in the world. We think about people who are being treated horribly because they're on the margins and they're different. We are hearing all of these terrible things. The folks in Flint, Michigan still don't have clean water to drink. And so I know that, for some of us, we go through this world and being disciples of Jesus Christ means we feel it. And then we can love the world back. Then we can send out our love and our prayers and let me just say, I'm digressing, so I'm going to walk over here. If you guys are feeling some of that with all this weight of the world, plastic in the ocean, choking the fishes, whatever it is that gets you, you've got to get your sleep. You've got to make sure you're eating a little bit. You've got to take care of yourself. If you don't, then we can't be the instruments God needs us to be because it can just get us. We need to lean in and support each other, but then figure out, okay, how do I care for myself and move forward? So with all of this, how can it be joy? How can it be joy? So I got to thinking about that really hard. If joy is the mark of Christian faith, I want you guys to chew on that this week. Is joy the mark of Christian faith? And if so, are you experiencing joy? When was the last time that you experienced real joy? Now, I'm not talking about being happy. Happy is circumstantial, and it's a little more shallow. Things can happen and shake up our happiness. Happiness is joy is deeper. Joy is from a deeper place. You know that feeling. And sometimes you can laugh with somebody and you feel that. Joy is deeper. When was the last time you felt it? I was thinking that the last time that I felt really deep joy was the other weekend, just last weekend, December 3rd, 4th. My dad had his 80th birthday, and my siblings and I plotted together to surprise him. And so my brother Doug lives in Maryland, my sister Marty's in Arizona, and I told Dad I had a thing at a church in Denton and that I had to help with an event, and could he meet me for breakfast? So he and my mom and my brother, who stays with them a lot, were going to just come and meet me for breakfast. No big deal. Well, when he got there, we had all of this, we were texting and everything. When he got there, all of us, my brother, his wife and son, my sister and her husband, all of us were there at the table, and he hadn't seen all of us together in 2.5 years. He hasn't seen my brother from Maryland in 2.5 years. And so he came in, and we had our menus up so that when he came in, we could put them down and start singing happy birthday. And here's a picture from that Steve took. So we were all singing happy birthday and crying, and my daddy was crying, and he couldn't believe it. In fact, he was mad for a second because he looked and he thought, what is Ginger doing with all those people? Like that's not what I was up for this morning. And then extra horror, he thought that there were people from the church that I was supposed to be doing something with, and so then he started. You know how when you see somebody and they're out of context and it takes you a minute to realize that's who that is? He was having all of this happen. But we were crying. I cry when people are kind. There's some videos we've shown in here that are beautiful, uplifting things about kindness, and I am just bawling my eyes out. I cry over when people triumph over adversity. Last summer, Simone Biles and the whole Olympic gymnastics team, I just crying through the whole thing, every medal. Whoa. So, okay, I've known for a long time, really known, that when you love big, you will also grieve big. That's the deal. If in this life you're going to allow yourself to love big, you risk grieving big. And some people won't make that deal. Some people will say, I'm not going to let myself be hurt like that again, and they keep their life right here. But if you're going to love big, and Jesus wants us loving big and full out, then you are also open. What I really didn't put together until this week was that joy and sorrow are on a sort of similar path. If you allow yourself to feel the sorrow of the world and open that up in yourself, then you also access greater joy. So if you keep it right here, Brene Brown says that if you numb out because the sorrow gets too much, whatever your favorite, she calls them shadow comforts, whether it's food or drinking or shopping, any of those things, if you numb out, then you may not feel the suffering, but you also won't feel the joy. So there's this relationship. And I think that when things touch us deeply, even if they're happy things, it sort of gets all to be part of the same emotional stuff. So yeah, when people are kind, I'm crying. When people triumph, I'm crying. When my dad comes in and is surprised by us and it's this moment, I'm crying. So it's an interesting relationship. And when we say, and I say this a lot, that Christ wants us to live the best of all possible lives, his way of discipleship opens us to the best of all possible ways to live. I really think that this is part of it. That, yeah, we're going to go through with our hearts wide open and seeing the pain. And I think there are people in the world that aren't disciples of Jesus Christ that also feel this pain. But I think that that's Jesus too. They just don't know it. But people go through. But if you are a disciple and you feel it and you see it, you don't get to just sit on your couch and watch Luke Cage or whatever you watch and not feel the pain of the world as disciples of Jesus Christ. But we also have access to this unbelievable amount of joy, and the love and the joy and hope are all part of the same package. So it's this good stuff. There's a United Methodist pastor in Virginia called Jason Michelli who just wrote a book called Cancer is Funny. And he's irreverent, and he's real, and he's honest, and he is hilarious. That's Jason. He was diagnosed with a cancer that's so rare and so serious that they didn't even stage it. They call it stage serious. And he wrote this book about it, and I commend it to you if you see it in the bookstore. Just his description of the first time he went in for an exam, he had his hospital gown on the wrong way. He didn't know how to put it on, and he had it on the wrong way, and the doctor came in and went, "Oh my," which you really don't want your doctor to do, you know? Right off the bat, you're doing it wrong, you know? But he talks about how this very thing, how Christianity is grounded not in suffering but in joy. But suffering gets a lot more attention. Jesus wept in the Gospels. We don't have any good texts of Jesus just losing it laughing, Jesus telling knock-knock jokes with the disciples. We got none of that. But Jesus is laughing, but every indication is that he was a joyful man. But there's no focus on that. Paul got onto one of his congregations because he thought they were being too silly and frivolous and too joyful. And then if you look at every saint in any statue of any saint for all of history, they all look like they've just smelled bad cheese. They do. And it's like, okay, that's what it's supposed to be. We get this idea that, the burden, it's supposed to be dour. And Jason Michelli says, not at all. We can't be focused on Good Friday to the exclusion of the incredible, joyful surprise of the resurrection. That's where our attention needs to be. That no matter what happens, the resurrection is coming, and we know that. So here I am talking about Easter during Advent, but it all comes around because when this baby is born, we know how the story ends, and then we know how the story ends again. We know that when Mary went to see Simeon, this righteous man, he took the baby. He had waited for Messiah for so long, and he knew right off that this baby was the Messiah. And he held the baby, and he rejoiced. And then he gave Jesus back to Mary, and he told her, "Your soul will be pierced with a sword." Some of you may have gone to see the movie Arrival. I know last week I was talking about Fantastic Beasts, this week a little bit about Arrival. If you haven't seen it, I commend it to you. I'm not going to give anything away, except to say that one of the central questions in it is, if you knew everything that was going to happen, the goods and the bads, if you knew it all, would you do it anyway? If you knew everything that was going to happen, would you do it anyway? Mary would. She did. I love my daddy with my whole being. I love my father so big. And I know that that means that there's the possibility of grieving big. And maybe that's part of why an 80th birthday celebration is so poignant. You know, I don't know how much longer that I have with my dad. But I'm going to appreciate all the minutes that I've got and find joy. My friend Franny felt joy in the midst of that hospital room with all the beeping machines and her mom. She wasn't happy. Again, it's not happiness. Nobody's happy to have cancer. Nobody's happy that their mom is in the hospital. But there can be this deeper experience that has to do with the presence of God. Let me let Jason Michelli have the last word on this because he's living this all so closely. He says, after 8 cycles of 9 chemo drugs, I believe laughter is still the best medicine. But even more so, I've come to believe laughter is the surest sign you're not alone, because joy is the most unmistakable indication of God's presence. Joy is the most unmistakable indication of God's presence. Our suffering can cause us to turn to God, but our suffering's not going to get us to bind to God. That's the joy. So as you move through this season, if there's poignancy in it for you, if there are people at your Christmas or people who aren't there who should be there, all of those things, look deeper for the joy. And ask yourself about that. How much are you allowing yourself, in the face of whatever you're going through, to feel real joy, that deep feeling? And consider the idea that when you feel joy, when you access that you are as close to God as human beings can get. Will you pray with me the Lord's Prayer? Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen.